Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Easy Hard versus Hard podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping you find the work that actually matters in your life. Today, I am beyond excited because the author of the best book I have read this year and top 10 of all times is here today. So Ken Davenport is here. So before we get to talking to Ken, let me just tell you a little bit about Ken. Ken is an entrepreneur and writer in San Diego, California. He's also the CEO of Mission Edge, a social enterprise providing consulting and strategy services to nonprofits and small businesses in underserved communities. Prior to starting Mission Edge, Ken was a serial entrepreneur who started and ran several successful companies in healthcare and data analytics. Ken is passionate about veteran entrepreneurship and teaches Boots to Business course in the Institute of Veterans and Military's Family First at Syracuse University, and has been an instructor for the Veteran Transition Program with 4Block. Ken is a past board member at the Travis Manning Foundation, a past board member at San Diego Social Venture Partners, and remains an active seed investor and mentor to numerous startups. Ken's is also an author, as I said, and includes two novels, an alternative history of the early 1960s called The Two Gates, and a near-future techno-thriller called The Bug Hunter. His most recent book is a guide for veterans in transition called The Stoic Transitions, How Veterans Can Thrive in Their Next Adventure. And in the pre-notes, he didn't mention his book, The Stoic Edge, which is the number one. And for those of you who listened to the podcast many times or have talked to me, I'm a big promoter of that book, and I encourage everyone to pick up a copy. And of course, we'll put all the links to Ken and his books in the show notes. But Ken, welcome to the show. It is such an honor to have you here today. So other than your bio, which I kind of botched because I can't read well in public, what else would you like to do to get us started on this?
Well, thank you, Bobby. Big fan of yours and love the work you're doing. And I'm just thrilled to be here to have a conversation about Stoicism, about kind of finding your purpose and the whole topic title of your podcast, I think, is very apropos to the stuff that I write about, the stuff I work on, and the stuff I think about just in my own life every day. So super happy to be here.
Yeah. And so for the audience, I met Ken at that Syracuse. He was giving a class on something business. And, I reached out to all the teachers, guest lecturers, and we actually had a great conversation. And I tell you, I read your book on Stoicism, and it was exactly what I needed at that time in my life, because I'd started to explore it. But just for those who are out there who don't know, give us a little synopsis of what Stoicism is.
Yeah, so Stoicism is an ancient philosophy, really started in ancient Greece, way back in 300 BC. And really the fundamental concept is that you can't control what happens to you in life, but you can control your reaction to it. So it really kind of puts you in charge of how you show up and how you react to the things that occur. And, particularly in this day and age, and one of the reasons why I got so kind of into it, it was during the early parts of COVID, and I felt like I had no control over anything. My 14-year-old kid was sitting at home on Zoom, instead of going to school, and my business had shut down. And I was thinking, I really feel like I'm being whipsawed. And I got up every day feeling very frustrated. I thought, I need to find an outlet for how I can kind of frame what's happening to me in a way that I can put myself back in control. And I just happened to stumble on Stoicism, and I thought to myself, this is the perfect antidote to a world where you feel like things are happening to you all the time, because you've got this dopamine rush that's coming in your phone, and you've got a constant news cycle, and you kind of feel like you're really being kind of whipsawed around, and you don't really have control. And Stoicism basically, debunks that by saying, look, there may be a lot of things happening out there, but it's up to you to decide whether you get angry, whether you get frustrated, whether you have anxiety about it. It's in your power. And of course, it's easier said than done. It's a practice. It takes a lot of work, as we all know, but it gives you a little bit of a framework for kind of slowing things down and getting back to basics. And I think that's what appealed to me about it.
Yeah. And I think that's what I needed the message in my life, especially the whole thing about slowing down, because so much, especially now, and the Stoics didn't have the same kind of media blitz that you were discussing earlier that we had.
Yeah.
But the fact that you could just slow down, because if you're going too fast, you can't see the goodness around you. You
Yeah.
then feel like whatever's happening to you is happening to you, and then it just gets worse, worse, worse. So that the whole mental aspect of stoicism is again realizing what's happening to you, control what you can control, which I'm finding is less and less the older I get, is what you can actually control. But you did say you can control the way you look at life, and then you can also control your actions and going out there and doing work, right? So many people like to dwell, and what I like to talk about a lot is don't overthink things. Can you give some guidance on how the Stoics talk about overthinking things and taking action?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Stoics were big on kind of putting things to putting your impressions to the test. In other words, a lot of times you react impulsively, or you react in a way that is very instinctive, because you're reacting really with not the prefrontal cortex part of your brain, but you're reacting emotionally, which lives in your limbic system. And it's a reaction that is very much kind of reactionary, right? And the Stoics were big on saying, hey, hang on a moment, put this impression to the test. Is this real or not real? Are you really being offended here? Is this person really mean to offend you? Or are they just living their life and doing the best they can? And a lot of it comes down to giving people the benefit of the doubt, not immediately assuming that not taking everything personally. Right. And I think one of the challenges that I had in my career was, when things went wrong or something happened, I would immediately kind of take it personally and get upset and feel like this was directed at me personally. Right. And then when I take a step back and look at it, I would realize that, it's really not about me. This person's having a bad day, or, they end up failing on that. And yeah, it affects me, but it's not a reflection on me as a human being. Right. And so what it comes down to is the idea that, no one can impose upon you your reaction. One of the sayings in Stoicism is that you can choose not to have an opinion about something. You don't have to have an opinion about what's going on. And of course, everyone's got an opinion about everything, and everybody's ready to put it on social media, even though they don't really know what they're talking about. And so one of the things I've learned is, like, there are times where I don't need to have an opinion. I don't need to feel exercised by this issue. Like, it's not affecting me on a day-to-day basis. It's an intellectual discussion that we're having. It's not a practical discussion. And I can sort of choose not to be upset about it. And so really what it does is it kind of focuses your actions on, living a life of virtue. And the virtues I think are at the core of what Stoicism is really about. So the Stoic virtues are four of them. It's wisdom, which is essentially knowing what to care about, knowing, what is important and what is not important. Courage, which is having the ability to kind of on your convictions and know what is worth standing up for, and to have the power to stand up when you need to stand up. Discipline, which is really about, kind of not overreacting and being able to have the discipline to say, hey, I'm going to take a step back here, and I'm not going to act impulsively, and I'm not going to get angry, and I'm not going to say something that I might regret. And then justice, which is essentially whatever you do in life needs to be for the good of other people, that the only meaning that you have as an individual is your effect on the community that you live in. And that everything else, every individual accolade is worthless if not put in the context of how that is helping other people in your life. Right?
Yeah.
And so that framework, which I think is so powerful, is really what kind of orders your behavior, as someone that follows Stoicism. And of course, look, no one's perfect. And we all, like, I got mad at my son the other night and got angry and didn't take a step back. And I said a bunch of stuff to him that now, regret. And I realized that, like, we're all kind of imperfect beings just trying to, do as good as we can, and we're sometimes going to fail. But the idea is that you're able to kind of recalibrate and learn from your mistakes and try to come back tomorrow a better person. And so that's the precept of it.
Yeah, yeah. That and it's funny when I was writing the easy hard versus hard, my whole premise was, finding work that matters to you. Because I found in society today, and you talked about it briefly, we outsource our emotions, our feelings, our opinions to media, social media, whatever it may be. And then we lose that sense of who we are. And as you mentioned, sure, sometimes you're gonna mess up and you're gonna make mistakes. But the further we get from our core of who we are and the virtues that you talk about, the four virtues, the further we're going to get away from the work that matters to us and our true self. And then therefore, everything that we do, no wonder when we start thinking, we start getting negative because we've forgotten who we are.
Yeah, 100%.
And I
Yep.
wish more people would, just turn the news off, turn the social media off. We were talking
Yeah.
before we shot this, and sometimes what we do being authors and promoting podcasts and stuff, you kind of have to put yourself out there. But once you get your virtues and say, hey, I'm here for a purpose,
Yeah.
you're not going to let other people influence you, and form your opinions, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you said it best, you can't serve others. Self-leadership theory is you can't lead others unless you lead yourself. Well, so many of us have lost the ability to lead ourselves. That's
Yes.
so prevalent in society. So
Yeah.
getting that, those stoic thoughts are just,
Yeah.
it's funny, something that old can apply today. And it's actually, they're written in such a way that you can understand them. You'd think that,
Yeah.
sometimes you read like Dickens or some of these other older books and you don't really know what they're talking about. But with the Stoics, it's so clear.
Yeah.
I'd like your opinion on that. I think that the most simple concepts in life, such as Stoic philosophy, controlling your thoughts, controlling your behaviors, they are just so simple that we can gain experience from thousands of years ago.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the beauty of Stoicism really is that it's a practical philosophy. It wasn't, Marcus Aurelius talked about, uh, you know, sort of being dismissive of the pen and ink philosophers, the ones who, would write highfalutin sentences and, just want to hear themselves speak or want to hear themselves, want to read their own writing. Like, and he was like dismissive of that because this is really about practice. It's about like, what do you do? Marcus Aurelius in Meditations talked about how hard it was to get out of bed on a cold morning and how he would just rather stay under the covers. But then he says, well, I'm not built here to stay under the covers. I have a job to do, and this is what my purpose is. So I got to get out of bed, but I don't want to get out of bed because I'm really warm and cozy. Like just stuff that's like very relatable, right?
Yeah.
And to your earlier point about the self, my new book is called The Virtue Ethos, and it really kind of the main concept of it is that virtue, the expression of virtue is an expression of your authentic self, of your true soul, right? And we all have it in us. It's just it doesn't come out because the persona, the mask we put on, the costume we put on every day to be who we appear to be in the world. Our ego with a capital E, our persona, kind of masks and puts us into a position where we can't really get to who we truly are. And we go down this path in life where we think we're being successful, we think we're doing what people expect of us, but it doesn't really match who we are inside. And the sooner you get, you know, connected to your authentic self and deal with what Carl Jung calls your shadow, which is that those deep dark things in your past, or maybe even hidden talents that you've suppressed because you didn't think it was appropriate for you to be an opera singer when you're really a tech guy or whatever it is, like those things lie inside you. And if they aren't integrated into who you really are, you're never going to get the full expression of yourself as a person. Right. And so, figuring out, getting connected with your true self is kind of the first job of like figuring out, like, how do I show up more authentically? And how can I show up as the great person that I really am that gets buried under all of these expectations that, oh, I've got to make $1 million this year, or I've got to like drive a great car, or I've got to like, send my kid to the best school. And I'm all freaked out because I'm not achieving these goals. And suddenly you're all focused on external things and not internal things.
Yeah. Yeah. That intrinsic motivation, what drives you, and tapping into your true self. The more I try to chase the approval of you or the approval of anyone, I never know what you're thinking. I never know what your bar is. So I'm always making assumptions. And the more I assume what you want and change my behavior to meet that or exceed that, the less I lose of myself. And that's my whole core concept is once you find work that matters to you. You said something earlier about Marcus Aurelius and getting out of bed because he had purpose. And talking to a lot of people in the last few months, so many people have lost their purpose. Do you have any advice on finding your purpose and on the Stoic way? And
It's a hard thing. I mean, I left my company in 2010, and basically spent a year kind of wandering around trying to figure out what my own purpose was. I had a 25-year career of kind of starting companies in the software and healthcare space. And, I don't know, it was fine. Like I made some money and whatever. I might have done a little bit of good, but I didn't really feel connected to, the reason why I was getting out of bed. I couldn't and eventually I got to the point where I just didn't want to get out of bed anymore and do the work that I was doing. So I wandered around, metaphorically, but also literally, like had coffee with a bunch of people and was just trying to figure out like what is out there? How can I tap into some action that I didn't really feel I had? I felt like I was sort of a little bit lost. And I found the veteran community. I'm not a veteran, but I found the veteran community as a community that I felt like I could help and I really kind of connected with emotionally. And I really, to this day, some of my closest friends are Marine and Navy veterans that I've helped in their transition, and it was very, very rewarding. But there's no like formula for every individual finding their purpose. And I also think that there's sometimes a misnomer that your purpose has to be necessarily what you do every day. I think a lot of people look at that and say, well, if I have to have a job where I'm actually fulfilling my purpose every day, that's a tall order for a lot of people. Like a lot of people aren't able to say, hey, I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to find my purpose. And then I'm going to create a company like I did at Mission Edge that actually embodies my purpose. And that's what I'm going to be doing every day. That's a luxury that I had. I'm grateful for, but not everybody has that. And so I think one of the things that's important is, look, paying the bills is important. Putting your kid into school is important. Like putting food on the table, super important. Sometimes you're not going to be able to necessarily align your day-to-day work with purpose, but whatever you do in your off time has got to be devoted to something that gives you some meaning beyond just making money, right? And beyond. So I think that there are a lot of ways to do it. I think, I kind of went back to what do I love to do? And actually that was a hard question for me. I'd gotten so kind of disconnected from what I cared about that I remember a friend of mine asked me after I quit my company, she said, well, you're so lucky, like you get to do your passion now. And I looked at her and I'm like, okay, but I don't know what that is. Right. So, and she said, well, that is your mission now, is to figure out what you're passionate about. And, I think that being willing to try things out, being willing to do unconventional things, being willing to take some risk, I think is important. And trying to expose yourself to things that you just normally wouldn't be around because it's not in your normal turn to do those things. So talking to people who you normally wouldn't talk to, getting outdoors, getting connected to nature, I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche who said that, no idea not thought while outside is worth a damn, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think a lot of people in this day and age, don't spend enough time in nature, don't spend enough time breathing fresh air, don't spend enough time giving their brain a chance to quiet down and kind of really connect with what they really think, as opposed to, as you said earlier, this massive dopamine rush of information is coming at you where you're not able to filter anything. Like you're not thinking of one original thought in your day.
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem. We have a lot of people who aren't thinking any original thoughts. And you have to insulate yourself from all of that noise and give yourself a chance to actually ask the question, like, what do I think about this? What do I care about? What's important to me? And then have the courage to be able to put it into action. So, it's very easy to say, well, this is the way I really feel, but, I'm not really going to do anything about it. And so, you have to act.
Yeah, action is the key, because action is going to be greater than any thought you ever have. Because the more you think, and I harp on this a lot on this podcast, is the more you allow your brain to think, it's going to start protecting you and stop you from doing whatever you do. But once you break through that barrier and you let your mind know that, hey, it's okay that I'm going out on this. Another
Yeah.
thing you mentioned, that I think I've been thinking a lot about lately, is so many people think that purpose has to be in their 9 to 5 job. And you eloquently said, hey, it's for most people, it's never going to be. But whatever your purpose is, I like to encourage people, bring it to your 9 to 5. If you
Mhm.
want to go be a coach, or you want to be a leader, and you're not in a leadership or coaching role, you can bring that to your job. The questions you ask, you're given such a great opportunity in the jobs that you do have to explore your purpose and try things out. And of course we got work that we have to do, but we all know that not the full 8-hour day isn't filled with work. So take that. Another concept I heard on a podcast a couple of weeks ago was bloom where you're planted. So think about a seed. A bird grabs it and it's on the cement. Well, if the seed decides not to take any action and grow fruit or grow a flower, it's not going to go. Well, eventually, if they grow where they're at, the wind's going to take them. Another bird's going to take them, and then they can be planted somewhere else. So just
Mhm.
because you're at a particular part in your life right now, and this is where the Stoic philosophy was so invaluable to me, because I was so dissatisfied in the work I was doing because it didn't meet my expectations, or the expectations where I thought I would be. But in reality, it was such a great proving ground for everything that I'm doing today and continue to do today. Because once I changed my mindset, like, no, not woe is me, like, how lucky am I? I get to be around, 20 or 30 people. I get to throw ideas and see how they stick with others and see how they react to it. So I think that the Stoic philosophy of just calming down where you're at and being happy with where you're at, because the French philosopher said 99% of our problems don't come true, or something like that. The things we worry
Exactly.
about. And,
Yeah.
and once you get, and I know we're talking about it like it's so easy, but we've both been through, I don't know, it's been 5 years for me, and I'm still working on it every single day. And people have mantras and stuff that they say every day. And I used to think that was kind of woo. But, if you wake up every single day and say, I'm so lucky to be alive, like,
Yeah.
it is amazing. All the things in the world, like disease and bacterias and, cars and all these things. I mean, it's truly a gift. Every single day we get to get out of that bed that he didn't want to get out
Yeah.
of because it's cold or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the two thoughts about that. One is, Seneca said, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality, which is, I think, one of the greatest quotes ever said. The idea that, we are suffering in our mind, and when it hasn't really happened, or we're anticipating suffering when it hasn't really happened, I think is something that we do a lot of doomsday thinking, and kind of worst case scenario. Now, sometimes it's good to, the Stoics were big about, premeditating, failure, because they wanted to be prepared. Like, I don't want to be super surprised if this goes sideways. I want to know, like, I've kind of anticipated this a little bit, but they weren't mired in the failure. They still were thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna live for today, and I'm gonna do the best I can. If I fail, I'll start over and I'll redo it. But I'm not gonna anticipate this, doomsday scenario all the time, and then have that impact my day to day. The other thing, the Stoics had, amor fati, which is, love of fate, which really is about loving where you are today, even if it might not be perfect and it actually might suck in certain ways, but that there's always an opportunity to learn and grow from every situation that you're in. So don't wish away what's happening today, but embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, so that you actually get value out of what you're doing right now. Because, as the Stoics were big to point out, like, the future is not guaranteed. Like, you may not be here tomorrow. So, you need to make the most out of right now, because this is all you really have, is what you're doing right this second.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you spend a lot of time saying, this is a common thing, and I've done this a lot in my life. Well, if I just get there, I'll be happy. Or like if I just have this successful thing, everything will be fine, right? And we all get into that mode. And of course, we may have that success and we may get there. And you know what? The day after, we're going to feel the same way we feel today. Like we're going to feel empty because no inner peace comes from external things. It always comes from inside.
Yeah. Yeah. I had so many conversations in my life that if I can do this, I'll be happy. If I gain this, I'll be happy. And I'll tell you the most recent that kind of brought me to this whole thinking, and I'm so grateful that it did. That's another thing. Be grateful for your past and be grateful for some of the struggles that you had, because it's invaluable to where you are today. But when I started pursuing my doctorate, I said, if I can become Dr. Shelton, I will love myself. I will finally be someone I like. Well, thank goodness along that process, studying leadership and then self-leadership specifically, I realized that, hey, this isn't the case. It's like chasing the horizon. I'll never catch it. So one day I opened the garage and a box falls in, okay? And the box was my diploma. It wasn't even in a folio. It was basically a pizza box that they mailed my diploma in. And my wife goes, oh, well, that's a little anticlimactic. You just spent 3.5 years of your life and this is all you thought about and did. And I said, you know what? It actually is great, because it just shows you that no degree, no title, no accomplishment defines you. It truly is just a piece of paper. And yeah, sure, it's a great accomplishment and it got me where I needed today. So I don't want to discount that. But at the same time, so many people that I talk to are like, if I can do this, or it's like the same excuse people use for working out. I'll start on after the holidays, or I'll start when this after the birthday or whatever. Start today. Grateful, like you said, one of the Stoics, and you know him well better than me. It said, every day you die to your old self. When you wake up, your old self is dead, and they don't mean don't take the lessons and the wisdom from your old self, but you can start to live again. So if you're listening today and you want to start making a change, you can do it. You just have to decide and go do it. But don't be chasing a change thinking it's going to make you happy. Be happy in spite of the change.
I think one of the books that was very helpful for me was Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is great, because I used to have a tendency of starting things and kind of petering out, not really finishing, and I realized that what he really advocates for is consistency over intensity. So rather than try to, climb a mountain in a day, like, just show up and, walk for 15 minutes to start and just do it every day. And gradually you will build the stamina that you need to really accomplish that goal. And the beauty of it is that his thesis is that you got to fall in love with the process of showing up every day. Like if you can become a person who shows up every day and just be in love with the idea that you're just going to do it daily, even if one day on a Monday you walk 15 minutes and on Tuesday you're tired, so you only walk 12, it doesn't matter. You are a person that shows up, right? And just fall in love with the process of consistency, and you will eventually accomplish things that you could never imagine. Right. So the Stoics, I think, would have really recognized that, because they talk a lot about, the importance of, being consistent and being a person of your word. Right. So like, if you say you're going to be there at 5 a.m. to go work out, you got to be there. Like you can't say, oh, well, I'm going to turn my alarm off and I'll hit snooze a few times and then, oh, I kind of missed it. It's no big deal. Like that's not the philosophy that will make you successful.
Yeah. Trust in yourself is so important, but so misunderstood or mispracticed by most people, because if I say I'm going to do something, whether I say it's to you, but probably even more important, if I say it to myself, you've got to do it. And that consistency, that's something I definitely talk about a lot, because I think you may have remembered, 5 years ago, I weighed 354 pounds. Well, I didn't get there overnight. And I couldn't take it off overnight either, right? It took every single day. And I relate to that. It's cold. And at first it would be like, it was cold. I don't want to go run. And then it changed. Something changed to me. And it was like, it's cold. And sometimes I would look for the most the coldest point of the day, the most miserable conditions, especially in the winter, because again, that was unhealthy too, because I thought you had to suffer to
Hmm.
change. You might have to
Hmm.
struggle a little bit, but if you're truly
Hmm.
suffering, and I think what we all find, when you in this journey too, everyone was like, "Oh, don't run. You're going to blow your knees out." Well, who knows? Who knows? But at the same time, if you think about it like that, you're never going to make that step. But we can
Hmm.
take our minds, our bodies way beyond what we're doing, and that's one thing that I took from the Stoics, and whether it's a misinterpretation or not, is that we don't we need a little baby discomfort. I don't like that word because some people think any discomfort they stop. But your body, your mind, your spirit can go so much further than we allow it to on a day-to-day
Hmm.
basis. And
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I mean, congratulations to you. That's a huge accomplishment. I mean, like that is like climbing Mount Everest, what you've done. And you also have to take time to, you know, appreciate your accomplishments, right? That's
Oh
the other
yeah.
thing is give yourself the ability to say, hey, I am a good person and I have done a good thing here, and not be so humble that you kind of brush it off, and kind of are so self-deprecating that you don't take the time to actually reflect on what you have accomplished, right? And so because that actually reinforces your virtue. It reinforces what you're capable of. It reinforces how you're able to show up. It reinforces how you are able to be the most complete person that you can be. And again, it's all about, mindful. It's really so I think of Stoicism as the original mindfulness, exercise, right? Like it's all about kind of being present,
Yeah.
and being like aware of what's happening around you as opposed to being reactive or, kind of being asleep, when you're really awake.
Yeah, yeah. Mindfulness is such, and it's a very good example of working out. At first, it's going to be difficult, and you're not going to get the results you want. But I wrote that don't compare yourself to LeBron James if you're trying to get in shape, because LeBron James is on a whole different level. But
Yeah.
if you can make that 1% improvement to yourself, and 1% is a great measure if you want to use a measure, which I don't recommend early on in your process towards anything, but 1% is good because it's kind of it's objective, right? It's if you feel you made 1% improvement, you probably did. And mindfulness is something and presence, that is something that, like, oh man, I think we're all struggling with that. And like we said, in the society we live in today, especially. But if you could just be present with yourself, start with 5 minutes a day, like going back to your atomic habits.
Yeah.
And he doesn't talk about crazy. I think one thing he said he did, I can't remember what the exercise was, but he did it while he was brewing coffee.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to brew a coffee, so that's not a lot of effort. But the thing is, he did it every single day that he brewed his coffee, and that's why I
Yeah.
love that book. It's on my top 10 as well. But
Yeah.
I definitely think that mindset, because so many people want the end result and they don't want to put the effort in to get there. Don't overdo the effort, because that's just as harmful. As we talked about, rest, recovery, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
But you've got to be consistency. I think if you look at the Stoics, or if you look at it, Tony Robbins, you look at anyone across the gamut of motivational speakers or wise thinkers, philosophers, whatever, it's all about doing action. Without action, nothing's possible.
Yeah. I think it also requires patience. And,
Mm,
patience is such an important concept now because we're so used to having everything immediate, right? And look at AI. I mean, AI, like, you type, I mean, it's crazy. You type in a query, suddenly you've got this like massive discourse that comes like that, and you're thinking to yourself, this is so fast, right? But at the end of the day, being patient allows you to have long-term sustainable change. And I think one of the things the Stoics were really good at, because, like, look, at 150 AD, stuff was slow, right? Like, you didn't get news right away. Like, you had to have a courier, come from the other part of the empire to come to, Marcus Aurelius's, home and give him a message. Like, it didn't come quickly, right? So you were used to sort of slowing things down and realizing that good things take time. I think we've gotten to the point in our society where no one is willing to take the time to say, hey, this is the first day of a 400-day process. Like for you losing all that weight, you started on day one. That was the first day of a long trip,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And, if you got discouraged because in the first 3 days you didn't lose 10 pounds and you said, oh, screw this, I'm not going to do this, I'm giving up because it's not fast enough, you'd still be 300 pounds. Right. And
Right.
so the idea is that, we're willing to just divorce ourselves from this clock we have in our own mind or the clock that society is driving us toward, and realizing that the most meaningful things in life, are done over a long period of time and done with care.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and when you talk about AI, I mean, it's such a crazy, like you said, the speed of information you get. But my fear with AI is if put it in the wrong hands, it can create more anxiety. It can create more because you can learn what I think I heard someone said that 95% of all the knowledge gathered in as long as we've been alive is now available on your phone within a matter of seconds. Well,
Yeah.
and one of the chapters in my book and the podcast last week is what are you going to do with that information? Well, you can either
Yeah.
use that information. Earlier today, I was telling my wife, I was struggling with a concept. So type it into AI and it just came up with a massive, it gave me clarity. It gave me a direction on the issue I was struggling with. Well, if I would have come out of that session thinking, oh, I had my problem solved, no, but it gave me a good start. It might have sped me up, but the patience and the diligence and the consistency still got to be applied. It just helped me a little bit. And I think that like the whole mindset that we talked about earlier, if you have a mindset of now, I got to get on to the next thing, which I know I lived it for so long, then that can become overwhelming because even in AI, you get a solution, but then you have to implement the solution, right? It's not a
Yeah.
be all end all just because you type
No.
the right words into the prompt.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, do you let it help your thinking or do you let it do your thinking? And I think that's kind of, to me, the big difference. Like I've used it like for this book I just wrote, but I used it to kind of help me to flesh out kind of questions that I had that I didn't know the breadth of what I was supposed to be asking. And so it kind of helped me to see angles that I didn't see before, but I didn't ask it to write it for me. Right. And that's the difference. And you can always tell when something's written by AI, it just sounds, it sounds fake. And I think that the key thing is that we've got to maintain our ability to think analytically and to think critically, and to not simply get so lazy that we're allowing AI to do our thinking for us. And I think that to me it's a danger, particularly with the younger generation coming up. The question is, are they going to understand how to think analytically, how to think logically, how to put pieces together and come up with their own conclusions? Or are they just going to get spoon fed everything? And then we're going to be like, sheep who are led around, by some master intelligence or whatever. And that would be a shame.
Yeah, it's more of what we talked about earlier. It's outsourcing your being. It's outsourcing
Yep.
the way you think about things, and then the whole discourse with. And that's one thing that we need to get back as a society. You wrote a brilliant newsletter about it. A couple months back, I think it was after you took a trip overseas or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
Just how angry people will get with each other, and you can't even have a healthy discourse with someone
Yep.
anymore because my experiences, your experiences, they're all different. That doesn't mean at the end of the conversation I have to agree or disagree or change my opinion. But didn't Aristotle say something about the wisdom comes from someone who's willing to change their mind? I think I might again. I'm talking to the expert here. I'm throwing it out.
No.
But it's so. It's one of these things that I'm deeply concerned about. If someone asks me what I'm concerned about is outsourcing our being, and it can be news, it can be anything, it can be baseball. I mean, it can be something. None of the politically charged or socially charged issues, but at the end of the day, like the AI is so great, like you said, it helped you think about new perspectives because you probably don't have the demographics at the ready to talk to, and you can see what other people are saying and thinking about different things. But again, it's just a suggestion. It's just a discussion essentially with you know uh,
Yeah.
a
I think
non-live being.
it's such an interesting question that you raised around, you know, um, uh, are we kind of operating on this? Everyone's operating on the surface and reacting to very shallow concepts and shallow ideas that are easy to recite and easy to digest, as opposed to really getting deeper into the idea that even if you're talking to somebody who you disagree with, they're still a human being. They still have a soul. They still have a, they still have a spirit that needs to come out, and that you actually have an opportunity to learn from them, as opposed to simply shut them down and say, I'm not even talking to you because on the surface, you don't appear to agree with the things that I agree with. And I think that that's such a huge sort of price that we're paying as a society, because rather than learning from each other, we're now in these tribal communities where there's groupthink and everyone thinks the same, and they talk about the same thing, they read the same sources, they listen to the same things. And so they all think, oh yeah, well, of course this is right. I mean, I can't imagine anybody not agreeing with this, when they're actually just talking to each other, and they're in an echo chamber, right? And I think that, that one of the things that has dawned on me, and one of the things that's so beautiful about service and about servant leadership, and just the idea that your meaning in life must come from helping others, is that when you really get down to helping others, and you get down to that person who's homeless, or you get down to that person who's, on food stamps and needs food, and you hear their story, you realize that this is just a human being who needs love, needs affection, and needs support. And that you talk about a dopamine high, a serotonin high, like the giver's high is the best drug in the world. What you will feel by getting out of your own way and helping someone in need is going to be way better than any social media thing you consume, or any alcohol, or any drug you could possibly take, right? And I think that, the Stoics kind of instinctively knew that. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was, felt like justice was the virtue among all other virtues, because it had to do with how you behave in the community and how you help others. Now, he was emperor of Rome, so he had a big impact on helping others. And he was known to have said and wrote in meditations, what's good for the bee is what's good for the hive is good for the bee, or maybe he said it the other way, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. So, like, the bee is in trouble if the hive is not healthy. And
Yeah.
and I think that those things, we've gotten very, I don't know, we're a self-absorbed society for sure. And people, all these influencers, trying to present their lives as perfect and beautiful, and everything is just, luxury and this and that and the other. And people have this envious view of all that. And what you don't realize is that that's just, it's probably fake, and it's definitely empty.
Yeah, yeah, or at least it's just a moment in time that they make it
Right.
seem like it's everything. Yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more. The whole concept of loving others, and we all know we need more love, and love isn't, it's just, I mean, it can be as simple as waving at your neighbor as you're going walking your dog or whatever, but true love, and then hoping that I think no matter if I agree or disagree with someone on a matter, they're doing their best and they have a reason for it, or that
Hmm.
they used to. I'm finding more and more that it is an outsourced thought. It's like, oh, well, like you said, whatever sources you read, that's what you're going to think.
Yeah.
And then you get the people that says, well, I listen to different sources. Well, do you? I mean, you're listening to the same, and it's still some kind of group think, and you think you're being empathetic towards someone, but empathy and love, and the more you find yourself, I think the more it just comes out in you. I know certainly
Yeah.
for me, I used to always say I wanted to help my fellow man, woman, whatever, but I didn't really mean it, because number one, I didn't love myself. And, the
Yeah.
greatest commandment is love God and treat others as yourself. Right. So if I didn't love or saw myself as a God, or I didn't love myself, how could I treat you? And certainly, well, we've certainly got a big gamut here from AI to Stoics. Man, imagine if they were around today and if were eavesdropping on this conversation, or part of this conversation. It would be amazed what they would say. Right? They'd probably be saying the same things. Right?
Yeah. The just to go back to the thing about, empathy, which is such an important emotion. And I think, Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, that book is is filled with empathy and empathy for other people. I mean, when he talked about, what Ryan Holiday sort of, made famous, the obstacle is the way, right? That whole idea that the impediment to action advances action, what stands in the way becomes the way. He was actually talking about difficult people that he was going to deal with on a daily basis. The idea that people are difficult. They don't really know what they're doing. They are, trying their best, but they're challenged, and you have to have a willingness to move through it, because it's the only thing that matters, is that you don't dismiss people, but you actually deal with them and try to make every interaction as good as you possibly can. But also the idea that you have empathy, that, people are doing the best they can. They don't know they don't know what they're doing. And rather than take it personally, know that, hey, my best approach is to be empathetic toward them and to try to treat them with respect, and know that that doesn't make them a bad person. Right? It doesn't make them wrong. It may make them they may be off, and you may not agree, but you have to treat them with kindness and empathy. And I think that's the human condition. One of the reasons why the Stoics are so, resonate so much, is that all the stuff that was happening 2,000 years ago, when you really get down to it, it's still happening today. I mean, it may be faster, and we have more information, and we're bombarded more, I think, with data. But on the other hand, like, dealing with people is still dealing with people. It hasn't really shifted.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our perspective, and it's like you said, the tribalism may be greater because, like you said, we don't have to wait 20 days or a year for information to get to us. And so therefore we think, because we get the information so fast, we have to react and have an opinion, or, it's that whole dogma in the society. At 47, I didn't see the same dogma 20 years ago when I started interacting with people, like, as an independent person. And it's like, how can you be so dogmatic? Like, how did you get to the point where you didn't know? And the older I get, I find the less.
Of course.
We all say, the word subject matter experts bannered about a lot, but, like, I don't know if I'm a subject matter expert in anything, because I feel like the things I know the most about, I've just scratched the surface, and I can always learn. It's like I'm a baker. And so, people are so dogmatic about the flour they use, the yeast they use. And it's crazy. And you'll see these sometimes online, people going back and forth, like cutting each other down over flour. Is that really worth it? As long as you're making bread that you like to eat, or your wife or your family likes to eat, who cares, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, love, empathy, stop the dogma. There's a guy in the kind of like the physical realm, Dr. Lane Norton, he says, beware of the dogma, beware of anyone who's dogmatic. If they say you have to, or you should, or you must, I like to tell people, hey, this is mine. But at the end of the day, this is my process. It worked for me, but it worked for me over a long period of time. There were a lot of failures, a lot of things that I would do today that I wouldn't do 5 years ago, and vice versa. And that's the beauty of life. That's another just purpose in life, that you get to learn something new every day. So every day I try to learn something new and try to make somebody's life better. And that alone is enough purpose to get you not bogged down to, oh, I hate that I have to write this report or research this or that or whatever at your job or whatever. It just gives you that. I hate the word clarity because it's overused these days, but it does give you clarity of self. And I think that's what we're both talking about here. Stoic, easy, hard versus hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think the world would be a better place if people focus more on themselves and less on what other people are doing. I mean, I think we're so externalized now. Everything is so external. Everything is so about what other people are doing, what other people are wearing, what other people are eating. Some of the health stuff might be helpful if you can internalize it. But on the other hand, like, focus on yourself. Get your own house in order. Focus on what you're doing every day. Show up as good a person as you can. Be kind to others. Do your job. Do your work. And the rest of the stuff. Be a good person, and the rest of the stuff will take care of itself. And I think one of the things that I would implore everyone, and I've done this recently, is I've gotten off social media since I got back from Europe, and I made that post you're talking about on LinkedIn. I got off social media, and I have to tell you, my life is much calmer. I have to say, and this is something that if you do this, you will find you will have time in your day back, and you will feel bored, and you will feel restless, and you will feel like, oh my God, I'm not that busy, and I'm not scrolling, and I'm not like, and so you're going to have to fill that time with something that's productive, right? And it's a beautiful opportunity to give yourself some time back, because if you look at how much time you spend doing mindless, stupid things on social media, you'll realize that, oh my God, like I was spending, 25% of my week, on a dopamine hit, scrolling Instagram.
It's so funny. I'm sure because you've done a lot and you produce a lot and writing and everything, and people are always telling me like, I don't know how you have time to do it, and I just think, how do you not have time to do it?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I feel like there are days that like I just have so many things that I want to do that it's just I just do them and I get so much joy. Like I if I don't have joy in something, there's that whole Marie Kondo, if it gives you joy, throw it out, whatever. But that's
Mhm.
true with what you do with your actions too. I know she was talking about things, but imagine if you could spend your whole day doing what you like to be doing.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
beautiful, and your productivity, your burnout, all that stuff goes. Well, burnout goes away, productivity rises.
Mhm.
It's truly, and I say you got to be selfish to be a little selfish at first to be selfless, and once you get past that, because society's like, oh, don't be selfish, don't be selfish, don't be selfish. Well, in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
the dopamine hits, the scrolling, that is selfish, but it doesn't serve you.
Totally.
And I never,
100%.
yeah, I've never
Yeah.
felt better after that.
Yeah, the Stoic virtues are sort of about, in some ways, being selfish, in the sense that to be virtuous, you have to internalize it, and you have to work on yourself. Right?
Mm.
So if you spend time working on yourself, people will call that selfish, but it's actually in the service of others. Because if you show up as the best person you can be, everybody in your hive is going to benefit from that. Your family, your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, everybody is going to get a benefit from you taking the time actually live a life of virtue, and to think about how you're showing up every day.
Uh,
So that's a selfish task that has massive selfless impact in a lot of ways.
yeah, no, I like it, and you might have done a good segue to your next book because it's the Virtue Ethos Handbook or Virtue Ethos. Um, is that a segue? Is that kind of what you're
Yeah.
talking about the virtue? So why don't you announce that, and then of course we'll keep everyone informed of when it comes out because I think you told me this winter, maybe possibly
Yeah.
before the end
Yeah.
of the year.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, it kind of grew out of sort of my own story, and kind of as I was thinking about the journey I took kind of with Stoicism, and realized that there was a lot of introspection, and a lot of like work that I did on myself, trying to figure out who I really was. You raised that earlier in the podcast, and I got into Jungian psychology mostly through James Hollis, who's a phenomenal writer and Jungian psychologist, who's got a number of books out that I think are well worth reading. And I started reading him, and started, getting into a little bit of this Jungian analytical sort of framework, this Jung's model of the psyche, which has the ego and the persona that we talked about earlier, the shadow, and started really kind of trying to get in touch with, like, who I know who I appear to be, but who am I really? And that was kind of the background of the Stoic work that I was doing, that I never really identified. And I really kind of touched on it very obliquely in my first two books, but I didn't make it, I wasn't conscious. And I started like trying to make it conscious, and started talking about my own journey to kind of figuring out, how do I get in touch with my true self? And then virtue is a part of that, because I believe that virtue can't come out unless you're authentically who you really are. You can't play act virtue. Like, you can pretend to be courageous for a time. You can pretend to be, disciplined for a time. You can pretend to be just for a time. But at the end of the day, if you're not really, you're not going to be able to maintain it. You got to get to the core of who you are, and you got to show up as your truest self. And so the virtue ethos is really about kind of the first part of the book is about like live, what Stephen Pressfield, who's one of my favorite authors, says, we all have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. And how do you get in touch with the unlived life that's within you? And then once you do that, you are in a position to say, I'm going to show up differently. And how do you show up differently? You embrace the Stoic virtues. And I go through each virtue in very simple terms, just kind of talking about the characteristics of wisdom and courage and discipline and justice. And then I talk about ethos. And what is an ethos? An ethos is a practice. So how do you create a virtue practice essentially? And how do you inculcate this into your daily life? And I kind of talk about the building of your ethos. And then at the last section is the practice piece. So how do you actually do this ethos work? And how do you create a virtue practice? And there are exercises and stuff. So it starts out super theoretical and then it gets very like tangible and practical at the end. And I kind of wrote it just for myself, to be honest. I mean, I write everything just for myself in the beginning because it's a cathartic exercise. And I want to it helps me to kind of get reconnected with the Stoic, with the Stoic inside of me. Right. And then as I started sharing it with people, they were like, oh my God, this really resonates with me. And I think there's a lot of value here. And so I think it's an interesting simple approach to how do you kind of show up as the full person that you can be, and how do you actually put that into practice. So I don't know. I hope it's helpful to people, and that my whole goal for doing this, as you know, as an author, it's not a way you don't get rich doing this. It's certainly none of us are going to be Stephen King or James Patterson. Like that's not the goal here.
Well, and James Clear probably thought the same thing.
That's true.
He made it big, and now he's the number one, nonfiction in the world, and he's got a very interesting story, which I've talked about before on the podcast. But no, that book sounds amazing, and it goes to exactly what I found to be true without taking the Stoic route as much as you have, is that finding your true self is the path. All other goals, all other changes you want to make in your life, until you know who you are and you're comfortable being you. And trust me, everyone listening, I know how difficult it is. I lived for years. And it's funny telling this story now. I was just talking to a guy earlier today, and he was reading some of the book, and he's like, man, I never knew you were in this spot. And I go, yeah, because it was an act. It was a charade. And that charade is probably more damaging to your ethos, your well-being, your satisfaction, because that's not you. And the key is like, you hear people that in their 70s or something, they say, I still feel like I'm in my 20s. Well, that's because you are still the same person. So just reconnect to it. And I hope this book, like I said, I agree with you. To make a small fortune as an author, start with a large. For most. And it is funny because, I hand out books all the time. People are like, oh no, I want to support you and buy it. I'm like, those cents aren't worth it. Just take this and enjoy it, because it is. And I was just like you. I wrote that book for me. I'm writing my next book for me, because I know what I went through, and hopefully somebody, and I tell you, nothing is, I don't know about you, but payment for me is when someone sends me a note and says, hey, I read something you wrote and it changed my day. I mean,
100%. Oh my God.
That's a dopamine hit that I could never get from LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. It is so powerful. And then check up with those people over time and see what it can do. I always say, any change you make, observe, but until you can truly observe, you've got to find yourself. And I think this book is going to help people get there. And I'm excited to read it because I'm kind of a fanboy here, but
well, I appreciate that. And it's interesting, I'm not a Jungian psychologist, and I'm not a Stoic expert. I'm not an expert on ancient Rome or anything. But the value, I think, is making it accessible to people who aren't experts. And like my journey is just how have I applied these things to my own life? I think that just by that example, it's like you and your journey so valuable, because people can see, well, if you did it, I can do it too. right? And to kind of make it accessible and to really get the principles and the concepts out that people can start to kind of latch onto and start to put put into their own practice in their own life. And I think that that's the only way this changes. I mean, we all know that, every day is a struggle, and you have to get up every day with intention. And none of this, it's not like it's not like you lose all that weight and then suddenly don't never worry about your weight again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you lose all the weight, but you're always thinking about, I don't want to gain it back, and I've got to stay on track. And, it becomes part of who you are as a practice in your life. And otherwise it's ephemeral. It comes and it will go.
Yeah. Yeah. And we got to avoid all those emotions, ephemeral actions or thoughts, because again, that they're fleeting. It's like motivation. I can't motivate anyone. I say that I might inspire you, but you have to self-motivate. You have to self-inspire. You got to go after, and that's being who you are. Just because, I mean, I did it wrong. I wanted to be like David Goggins. Well, I never will be David Goggins. But that doesn't mean he's not an influence. He's part of my virtual board of directors, right? I probably never will meet him in person. You talk about fanboy. It's just okay. So David, if you're listening, come on, But no, Ken, this has been truly, truly amazing. I could talk to you for hours. I don't know if people would want to listen to us for hours, but I truly, you've been a great influence in my life, and you've really helped me.
Thank you.
Any parting, and I didn't prep you, but I asked all my people one thing, but I want you to close out, then I'll ask my one question, and then we'll get people out of here. But anything else you want to close with?
I just think that, I really encourage people to continue to grow as individuals, and to really kind of put the work in to make your life as full as possible. I think it's very easy now to kind of get lazy and sort of, kind of phone it in, and not really spend the time really trying to find the life that you're really meant to live. I talk about in this book as the life you need to live. And I believe that we all have a purpose in our life that we need to be doing if we can find it. And so to me, it's like, keep looking for that life that you need to live, because I think that's where fulfillment is. And I think that's where the community really benefits, is when you are living, your purpose.
Oh, beautiful.
So,
Beautiful.
But I love the opportunity to talk to you, because I think we're kindred spirits, and it's always fun to these conversations.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If you live closer, you probably not like it, because I'd be calling you all the time, coming stopping by. But I do ask all my guests, because it's the easy hard versus hard. And again, easy hard is what you're working for the approval of others, all the things we talked about, all the wrong paths that we've identified. And hard is, what truly matters to you. So in the theme of the show and the interviews that I've done, what is your hard right now?
My hard really is being able to live in the present and be happy and comfortable with it. And I think, I had a conversation with a retired Navy SEAL yesterday, I'm kind of mentoring, and he was talking about like how hard the transition is to go from being in this very purpose-driven community where people are very connected and everyone's got their back, and they're really, to being just a person out in the world, and to waking up every day and trying to figure out, I just be happy with what I'm doing today, and as opposed to finding my happiness as a part of the tribe that I'm with, or part of the job that I have, or whatever. And for me, like, I have a purposeful job, and but I still find myself struggling on a day-to-day basis of just being content with where I am and doing what I'm doing right now in this moment. So my hard for sure is waking up on a Wednesday and looking outside and saying, hey, it's Wednesday. I'm happy. I'm going to have a conversation today. I'm going to live as full as I can, and not worry about what I'm not doing, or what I could be doing, or what I should be doing, or what I used to be doing, and I think, and again, like, I think we're all works in progress, right? And so and I write about this, but I still struggle with it on a daily basis. And so for me, that hard is just, loving my fate, loving where I am today, loving, the experience I'm having right now and being content with that.
Oh, that is beautiful, and I know the struggle because I'm in it too, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you being vulnerable, and I didn't prep him, so that was pure pure what he's doing. So I Ken, thank you so much for your time. I know it's been my pleasure. I hope everyone gained something from it. I'll put all the way to contact you, how to get your books, etc., in the show notes. But I encourage everyone. The Stoic Edge, it changed my course, and it helped me out so much. And I reread it, throughout the month. I always pick it up because I'm like, hey, what's this? What's this? What's this? So thank you for writing it. Thank you for being the person that you are.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. And I appreciate your time, and looking forward to reading your book as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll get one out to you, as we mentioned before. I gotta do it. But hey, everyone, thank you for listening. And as always, I'm Bobby Shelton. And until next time, keep chasing your heart hard and finding the work that actually matters to you.